The plane carrying all the oil mining workers accidentally crashes in one of the coldest regions of Alaska, where they face not only deadly packs but also mutated versions of wild animals. The amazing story begins by showing a man named John, who is struggling with his life. John works inside a factory located in a frozen area of Alaska. This factory extracts oil from underground and refines it, employing thousands of workers. The temperature there is so low that even food freezes instantly when exposed to air. Surviving in such extreme conditions is nearly impossible, yet John is more troubled by his personal life. His wife has grown distant and might even divorce him because he never spends time with her, staying away for months due to his work. John's job at the oil mining facility is as a shooter. He protects the workers by killing dangerous wolves that attack humans. The company doesn't want any of its employees injured by wolves, so they hired John for the job. He has saved many workers' lives with his rifle, capable of shooting accurately from a distance. But lately, John feels that staying away from his wife just for money isn't worth it. After all, he's earning to build a family, and without his family, this job means nothing. He even writes a letter to his wife, asking her to wait for him a little longer, promising that he'll return and fix everything. Back in the factory, all the workers are busy with their tasks when suddenly some of them start shouting. They've spotted a dangerous wolf approaching to attack. As soon as John notices, he pulls out his gun and takes aim. His shot hits the wolf perfectly, killing it instantly. John slowly walks toward the dead wolf, feeling a pang of guilt for taking the life of such an innocent creature. Placing his hand on the wolf, he says softly that this will be the last time. He's quitting the job today. It's his final day at work, and he plans to return to his family. Since this area is filled with packs of wolves, John was assigned this duty, but now the company will need to find his replacement. His shift has officially come to an end. So John boards a plane with a few other workers to return to his country. Everyone knew how brutally hard it was to survive in a freezing place like Alaska. Without wasting any time, they all get on the plane, hoping they'll finally make it back to their families. Everything seems fine at first, and John even begins to imagine his new life, building a small farm with his wife and living happily, even if he earns less in another job. But none of them could have guessed what fate had planned. Soon after takeoff, something goes wrong with the plane. The pilots lose control, and before they can react, the aircraft carrying all the workers crashes violently into the ground. The impact injures many passengers, and several lose their lives instantly. John and a few survivors crawl out of the wreck, trying to help as many others as possible. No one could have expected such a disaster. To make matters worse, the crash site is deep within one of the coldest parts of Alaska, far from any company base or shelter. When John returns to the wreckage to search for his friends, he watches helplessly as some of them die right before his eyes. The sight breaks him, but he knows he has to stay alive. The area is scattered with debris, and several people are missing without a trace. Suddenly, a wolf appears out of nowhere and attacks, biting John's leg and leaving him badly injured. However, John and the remaining survivors manage to fend it off with whatever weapons they could find. John quickly realizes that their plane has landed in the middle of a region surrounded by wolf packs. The haunting howls echoing in the distance make it clear that danger is near. He tells his remaining teammates that they'll have to survive the night right there. As the temperature drops even further, John insists they start a fire to keep their bodies warm. The other workers already saw John as a strong and capable leader, and now, in the middle of this frozen wilderness, they rely on him more than ever. John was the oldest among them, so the other workers naturally followed his lead. Together, they coordinated and somehow managed to get a fire going. Staying close to the flames through the freezing night was their only way to keep their bodies warm. But even with that small victory, John told the group they needed to move the dead bodies away from the site. The wolves surely knew by now that there were corpses lying around, and it was only a matter of time before they came in packs to feed. That would put all of them in serious danger. John suggested they either bury the bodies or drag them far enough away to keep the wolves from coming near. Everyone understood his reasoning but also knew how vicious wild wolves could be. If given the chance, a pack could tear a person apart within seconds. Still, John's words carried weight. He was the most experienced when it came to survival in such conditions. As he sat near the fire later that night, John suddenly heard growling from all around. He quickly grabbed a burning torch and moved a little further to check. The others froze in fear as they saw not just one wolf but an entire pack surrounding them, ready to attack. These wolves looked different, larger, meaner, and more terrifying than ordinary ones. Panic swept through the group, but John shouted for everyone to stay put. "Don't run," he ordered. "If we panic, they'll chase us down and kill us. Hold the torches and stare them down." The group followed his lead, holding their ground and glaring into the glowing eyes that surrounded them. After a tense few minutes, the wolves began to back away and disappear into the darkness. The fire and the humans' fearless stance had made them seem like predators themselves, and the wolves didn't want to risk a fight. But John warned that they'd be back. To stay alive, everyone would have to take turns standing guard through the night. As darkness deepened and the temperature plunged, John volunteered for the first watch while the others tried to rest. He kept the fire alive and remained alert for hours, doing his job perfectly. But when it was another man's turn to take over, exhaustion got the better of him. He fell asleep midway through his shift. Seizing the opportunity, a few wolves crept in and attacked him, dragging him by the legs and mauling him viciously. No one noticed a thing until morning. When John and the others woke up, they found their companion's lifeless body lying near the edge of the camp. It was obvious that the wolves had attacked him when his attention drifted away. But what disturbed John the most was that the wolves hadn't eaten him, they had only killed him. That made John realize something chilling. They were deep inside the wolves' territory, and the animals saw them as a threat, not prey. The wolves were attacking to defend their land. That meant their top priority now was to get out of this area as soon as possible. Staying in the territory of wild predators was practically suicide. John told his remaining teammates that they needed to gather as many supplies as they could. He spotted a few trees far in the distance and decided they should move in that direction. It would be a long and exhausting journey, but it was their only chance to escape the wolves before nightfall, when another attack was almost certain. None of them wanted to risk another night out there. Before leaving, they took the wallets of their dead companions and collected whatever resources were left, hoping that if they ever made it home, they could at least return something to the victims' families. But they had no idea this was only the beginning of the nightmare. Ahead lay not just the freezing cold, but something far worse, hybrid creatures unlike anything they could have imagined. Still, they had no choice but to keep moving, facing whatever came next together. As they trekked forward through icy winds, the weather grew more brutal by the minute, and a snowstorm could strike at any moment. During the journey, one of John's companions grew too weak to continue. Exhausted and freezing, he collapsed into the snow, barely able to move. Suddenly, he heard a noise from behind. When he turned, he saw a pack of wolves charging straight toward him. Within seconds, they reached him and tore into his body savagely. The poor man screamed for John and the others, but by the time they turned around, it was too late. The wolves had already ripped him apart completely. These weren't ordinary wolves, they were far more aggressive and dangerous than any of them had ever heard of. John could only watch helplessly, realizing there was no saving him. He and the remaining survivors kept moving, desperate to stay alive. The cold had become so extreme that their legs felt numb and stiff. Some of the men began pleading with John to turn back, to stay near the crashed plane and wait for a rescue team. But John shut that idea down immediately. "No one's coming," he said firmly. "This is the deadliest part of Alaska, no rescue team will ever reach here. Waiting means dying." And with that grim truth, they pushed forward into the endless white wilderness, clinging to the faint hope of survival. They soon realized a pack of wolves was following them, so John and the others ran hard until they slid down a snowy slope and found a flat surface where they quickly started a fire, hoping the flames would keep the wolves at bay. Knowing they still needed protection, John improvised defensive measures. They gathered sticks and set up crude deterrents, keeping a small cartridge ready on his rifle so a single shot or blast might scare the wolves off. Everyone agreed with the plan except one worker, Luke, who had hated John from the start and called the plan useless, saying they'd die because of it. The argument escalated until Luke pulled a knife and they came to blows, with John pinning him down. Suddenly a wolf stood staring at them, different from the others, with terrifying eyes and an enormous body that froze the group in place. After a long, tense stare the wolf turned and left, but John warned it was likely scouting for the pack and that they had to move. Later, a smaller wolf attacked Luke and badly injured him, but the group fought back and finally killed it. Starving, they burned and ate some of the dead wolves for nutrition, but the wolves' distant growls told them the pack knew one of their own had been killed and would return for revenge. John explained that they couldn't wait through the night, so they pushed on through the bitter cold and potential blizzard. With no shelter in sight, they lit a fire in the forest and camped, while John taught them the wolves' weaknesses. Loud noises and shouting can scare them. Fire or a flashlight aimed at their eyes can drive them off, and like many predators, these wolves carried diseases such as rabies, which made them even more dangerous. If they didn't get proper food, they would die on their own, so the first rule was not to throw edible scraps around. Any food left out would attract wolves and keep feeding them. I always said that to scare an animal you must make yourself look as big as possible. If you're in a group, stay tight and act like one large predator rather than many small targets. That could frighten a hunter away. But John and his companions were in even worse shape now. They planned to move at night, but their friend Jackson fell so ill they had to stop. John realized the winds were picking up and snow would soon start, making the cold deadly. If the fire died or the storm hit, they'd freeze to death even without a wolf attack. Sure enough, a blizzard began, the fire went out, and everyone froze. Jackson, already weak, stiffened and died despite John's attempts to revive him. The rest were numb with cold and would have died too if John hadn't somehow relit the fire and warmed them through the night. At dawn they forced themselves to move on, knowing the area was no place to linger with those dangerous wolves nearby. After hours of travel, John spotted a tree with a government tag, an official marker showing the state tracked the forest's trees, so he guessed a government base was not far away. When they heard the sound of water, hope surged through them and they hurried toward it, but a deep gorge blocked their path with a river running below. They couldn't go back because the wolf pack would be waiting, and they couldn't cross the chasm by foot. With no other choice, John and the others decided one person would climb the trees and tie a rope so the rest could be hauled across. They executed the plan. A man strapped a rope to his body and jumped for the trees, catching hold but losing a strip of cloth during the climb. Luckily, a second man grabbed it and pulled him to safety. After securely fastening both rope ends, they slowly hauled everyone across to the other side. John, Luke, and the others reached the tree safely, but when the last man, Ben, tried to cross slowly, his foot got tangled in a piece of cloth. As he tried to free himself, the cloth tore, and Ben fell from a great height, slamming into the ground. He was so badly hurt that he couldn't even move. The others rushed down to help him as fast as they could. Lying there, Ben began hallucinating. He saw his little daughter standing before him. He had planned to quit this dangerous job and return home to his family, but fate had other plans. In his final moments, his eyes stayed fixed on the image of his daughter. The next second, a pack of wolves appeared, dragging Ben away before anyone could reach him. By the time John and the rest made it down, Ben was gone, torn apart by the wolves. There was nothing left to do but keep moving forward. The blizzard grew stronger, but stopping now meant certain death. Somehow, the remaining three, John, Luke, and Henry, managed to reach the river they had heard earlier. The problem was that Luke's leg wound, caused by a wolf bite, had gotten much worse, making it nearly impossible for him to walk. Luke told them he couldn't go any farther and that John and Henry should continue without him. They tried to convince him to keep moving, warning that the wolves could strike again at any moment. But Luke confessed the truth: he had no reason to go back. No one was waiting for him, and his family saw him as worthless. Instead of dying in guilt, he wanted to embrace the wild one last time. His words carried painful honesty, and after several failed attempts to change his mind, John and Henry finally wished him luck and moved on, not knowing if Luke would survive. After walking for some time, they heard the distant howls of wolves closing in. Panic struck as the pack charged toward them. They ran as fast as they could, but when the wolves got closer, Henry slipped and fell into the river. The current was too strong for him to stay afloat, and he screamed for help. John jumped in without hesitation to save him, and for a moment it looked like he might succeed. Henry grabbed onto a floating log, trying to steady himself, but his leg got trapped between the rocks, pinning him underwater. He struggled to breathe as John fought to reach him, even giving him mouth-to-mouth in desperation, promising he wouldn't let him die. But the freezing water was too much. Henry couldn't handle it and went still in John's arms. Crushed and alone, John pulled himself to the icy bank. Every one of his companions was dead now. He was the only one left, lost in the snow, unsure how long he could survive. A deep sense of hopelessness began to settle in. Maybe this was where his journey would end too. He felt like giving up his life. After all, no rescue team was coming for him. All around were nothing but freezing winds and ferocious wolves. Still, John forced himself to keep moving, hoping he might find the government base camp and be saved. But in such brutal cold, surviving this long was beyond human limits. He was just a man, and now hypothermia was beginning to take hold. Exhausted, he sank down into the snow, unable to go any farther. In his trembling hands were several wallets, belonging to his fallen teammates. They had planned to deliver these to the families once they made it back home. John opened each wallet, staring at the photos of smiling wives, children, and parents. They all looked so happy, unaware that their loved ones would never return. The thought of how their families would react shattered him. He pulled out his own wallet and looked at the picture of his wife. His mind drifted back to when she was alive, weak and fading from a terrible illness he couldn't cure no matter how hard he tried. The disease had taken her away, leaving him with only memories. As he sat there lost in thought, the low growl of wolves echoed again. He turned his head slowly. Dozens of them had surrounded him, watching, waiting. It was clear they were ready to attack. But John no longer had the strength to fight. He thought about ending his own life rather than being torn apart by beasts. Yet his imagination pulled him somewhere else, to his childhood, to the days when he went hunting with his father. He remembered his father's words clearly: "The fight is never over, son. There's always one more battle left, and you give it everything you've got. Never give up." Those words echoed in his mind as the wolves crept closer, their glowing eyes fixed on him. John steadied his breath, the cold biting at his skin, unsure what he would do next, but knowing the fight wasn't finished yet. But deep within John, something fierce awakened, a storm of vengeance, survival, and sheer defiance. Every scar, every loss, every scream of his fallen friends fueled the fire inside him. He could almost hear his father's voice echoing in his mind: "A fight doesn't end until you stop fighting, son. Even if the world turns against you, you fight till your last breath." Those words struck through the noise of the howling wind, igniting a spark in John's frozen heart. He looked down at his hands, empty, trembling, and cold. His gun was useless now, every bullet had already been fired. The only things left in his backpack were a few glass bottles, half frozen from the bitter cold. Then an idea hit him. In that desperate moment, he decided to turn what little he had into his weapon. He tore strips of cloth from his jacket and tightly wrapped the bottles around his fists. One by one, he smashed them against a rock until the edges splintered into razor-sharp shards of glass. Now his hands looked like the claws of a beast, deadly, savage, and ready for war. The sharp edges gleamed faintly under the dim moonlight, reflecting John's determination. His breath came out in white clouds as he tightened his grip, the cold biting into his skin. The pain didn't matter anymore. He wasn't fighting for escape now, he was fighting for revenge, for his friends, for his will to live. As he stood there in the snow-covered clearing, the wolves emerged from the shadows one by one. Their yellow eyes glowed in the darkness, their growls vibrating through the frozen air. There were at least a dozen of them, massive, feral creatures circling him slowly, their teeth bared, their hunger almost visible in their breath. But John didn't move. He stood tall, glaring back with eyes just as wild. He was no longer the hunted. Not anymore. The wolves crept closer, the crunch of their paws echoing like a drumbeat of death. Snowflakes swirled between them, carried by the wind, as if nature itself was holding its breath for what was about to happen. And then, without hesitation, John roared, a sound that came from somewhere deep within, pure and unbroken. He raised his glass-covered fists, ready to face the entire pack alone. The wolves didn't flinch. They knew what was coming. But so did John. It was no longer about surviving the night. It was about making sure they remembered him, even if this was the last thing he ever did. In an instant, the battle between John and the wolves exploded into chaos. The night echoed with growls, snarls, and the sharp clash of glass against flesh. The wolves lunged from every direction, their fangs snapping dangerously close, but John fought like a man possessed. Each strike from his makeshift, glass-covered fists tore through the air with brutal precision. He swung, slashed, and stabbed with everything he had left. The broken glass glimmered like blades in the dim moonlight as blood, both his and theirs, splattered across the snow. The wolves circled him relentlessly, pouncing one after another, but John refused to fall. His roars mixed with theirs, sounding less like a man and more like another predator in the wild. One wolf leapt for his throat, but John spun and slammed his jagged fist into its side, sending it crashing into the snow. Another lunged from behind, he drove an elbow backward, the shards digging deep. Pain didn't matter anymore. Exhaustion didn't matter. Every wound he took only pushed him harder. He was fighting not just to live, but to prove that he could still stand his ground in the face of death. Minutes felt like hours as the brutal fight raged on. Finally, when the howls began to fade, the snow-covered ground lay still. The silence that followed was almost deafening. Around John lay the bodies of several wolves, some motionless, some barely breathing, their dark fur stained crimson against the white snow. He had fought for love, for his friends, and now for his own soul. Even if his body gave out, his spirit had already won. And so, our painful, haunting story ends here, with a man who faced the wild, the cold, and death itself, and still chose to fight. This is how our story ends here.